Hi all, welcome to the second session of life process. Today we will be learning about respiration. Life process. Explain respiration. In the textbook, first itself, the two activities are given. That we can check later. Respiration is the process by which living cells break down food, mainly glucose, to release energy needed for life activities. Okay, it's a process in which cells break food. Food is in the form of glucose. The chemical formula of glucose is C6H12O6. So they break food and release energy. Why energy is needed? For all life activities, for day-to-day growth, maintenance, body repair, we need energy. So to release that energy, breakdown of food occurs. And this breakdown of food to release energy is called respiration. Why is respiration necessary? The food we eat contains stored chemical energy. Respiration releases this energy so that organism can grow, move, repair tissues, reproduce, carry out all metabolic activities. Breakdown of glucose. In every cell, glucose breaks first down in the cytoplasm into a 3-carbon compound called pyruvate. C6H12O6 gives 2-pyruvate plus energy. After pyruvate is formed, it can follow different pathways depending on the availability of oxygen. So first step in respiration is breakdown of this glucose. Where is this glucose located? The glucose is located in the cell. So first the glucose breaks down in the cytoplasm of the cell to a 3-carbon compound called pyruvate. From one molecule of glucose, 2 molecules of pyruvate is released, and together with the pyruvate, energy is also released. After pyruvate is formed, it can follow different pathways depending on the availability of oxygen. After pyruvate is formed, it can follow different pathways depending on the availability of oxygen. And after once this pyruvate is formed, then it can continue the pathways, or it can follow different pathways depending on the availability of oxygen. First one is aerobic respiration, that is with the oxygen. What is aerobic respiration? Aerobic respiration means in the presence of oxygen. So those respiration that takes place in the presence of oxygen is called aerobic respiration. It occurs in the mitochondria, requires oxygen, glucose is completely broken down. The products formed are carbon dioxide, water, large amount of energy. Glucose plus oxygen gives CO2 plus H2O plus energy. Example, humans, plants, most animals under normal conditions. This occurs mostly in the mitochondria. Aerobic respiration. Next one is anaerobic respiration, that is without oxygen. It occurs in the absence of oxygen, less energy is released. It takes place in yeast in the form of fermentation, where pyruvate is converted into ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy. Pyruvate is converted to ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy. Example, yeast used in bread and alcohol production. So pyruvate is converted into ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy. Pyruvate is converted to, do you know the chemical formula of ethanol? Okay. And CO2 plus energy. Yeast used in bread and alcohol production is example for this anaerobic respiration, because there occurs respiration with in the absence of oxygen. That is, pyruvate is converted to ethanol and carbon dioxide plus energy, and the amount of energy released is very small, less as compared to the energy released in aerobic respiration. Next is respiration in muscle cells. During vigorous exercise, muscles may not get enough oxygen. Then pyruvate is converted to lactic acid plus energy. Pyruvate gives lactic acid plus energy. If I am doing heavy workouts, what happens in my muscles? In my muscles, the pyruvate get converted to lactic acid plus energy, and this lactic acid causes muscle cramps and fatigues, means pain. Lactic acid accumulates in muscles. This causes muscle cramps and fatigues. What do you mean by cramps and fatigues? Cramps and fatigue. Cramps are hidden painful contractions of muscles that occur involuntarily. Common causes are overexertion during exercise, dehydration, lack of minerals such as potassium, calcium or magnesium, poor blood circulation. that are painful contractions of muscles that occur involuntarily. And fatigue means a feeling of extreme tiredness, weakness, or lack of energy. Feel very after continuous exercise. Sometimes the pyruvate is converted to lactic acid. Then I feel very tired, very weak, and lack of energy. Also, there will be pain in my muscles, and this condition is called, or this condition arises due to respiration occurring in muscle cells due to vigorous muscular activities. That is, respiration in muscle cells during vigorous exercise, muscles may not get enough oxygen. Then pyruvate is converted into lactic acid plus energy. Pyruvate converts to lactic acid plus energy. Lactic acid accumulates in muscles. This causes muscle cramps and fatigue. Lime water test 5.4. What is the activity? Activity 5.4. Take some freshly prepared lime water in a test tube. Take a test tube, and what is in the test tube? Freshly prepared lime water. Blow air through this lime water. Here the figure is there. This is the test tube containing lime water, and we are blowing. Blowing means not how long it takes for the lime water to turn milky. Now note the time and look the lime water. How much time it turns milky. That is, its color changes to a milk-like color. Use a syringe or pitchkari to pass air through some fresh lime water taken in another test tube. How long it takes for this lime water to turn this milky. And in another test tube, what you have to do? You have to take a syringe or pitchkari or syringe, and you have to blow air into that test tube containing lime water, and note the time. Again note the time. We have to compare that to time. In one test tube we take lime water, and whereas in another test tube we take lime water and with syringe we inserted the air. What does this tell about the amount of carbon dioxide in the air that we breathe out? So we can look for the conclusion. When you blow air into lime water, it turns milky faster than when ordinary air is passed through it. Reason: exhaled air contains more carbon dioxide than atmospheric air. Carbon dioxide plus lime water gives milky appearance. Conclusion: respiration produces carbon dioxide. So in chemistry, in our first chapter, chemical equations and reactions, we will study that carbon dioxide plus lime water turns lime water milky. So conclusion is respiration produces carbon dioxide. And in these two activities, which test tube gets milky faster is the first, or the image shown in B, because while blowing, the carbon dioxide that gets into the test tube is more as compared to the air that we inject using a syringe. That is our exhaled. What do you mean by exhalation? What do you mean by inhalation? So inhaled air, exhaled air. So in this exhaled air, carbon dioxide will be more. So when we blow this carbon dioxide to the test tube, test tube containing lime water, it will turn milky faster. Whereas when we are injecting the air to a test tube containing lime water, we are injecting the air from the or carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Thus, the atmospheric air contains less amount of carbon dioxide as compared to the exhaled air. Since the carbon dioxide in exhaled air is more, it turns the lime water milky faster. Next experiment. Take some fruit juice or sugar solution and add some yeast to this. Take this mixture in a test tube fitted with a one hole cork. Fit the cork with a bent glass tube. Dip the free end of the glass tube into a test tube containing freshly prepared lime water. Take some fruit juice or sugar solution and add some yeast to this. Okay, take some fruit juice. While you are going to a bakery to drink fruit juice, add some yeast to the fruit juice. I'm just joking, okay, don't do that. Take some fruit juice or sugar solution and add some yeast to this. Take this mixture in a test tube fitted with one holed cork. Fit the cork with a bent glass tube. Dip the free end of the glass tube into a test tube containing freshly prepared lime water. What change is observed in the lime water and how long does it take for this change to occur? What does this tell us about the products of fermentation? Here no figure is given. We can see whether the ChatGPT can create a figure for us. So how can I show that? Okay, this is a glass containing fruit juice. This fruit juice is there, and we are pouring some yeast to the fruit juice or sugar solution, and we are in the closing this jar or test tube. We are taking the test fruit juice in test tube and we are adding a little yeast. Then we are closing the test tube with a cork with the top little opening, and we are inserting a bended glass tube through that cork and we are connecting it to another beaker containing lime water. The figure Yes. This is the one hold cork mixture of fruit juice or sugar solution with yeast. And here is the bended glass tube. And here it is freshly prepared lime water. Initial step, the yeast mixture is kept in a test tube. The other test tube contains freshly prepared lime water. The two are connected by a bent glass tube. After some time, bubbles are seen in the yeast mixture. This shows that carbon dioxide gas is being produced. What happens in fruit juice also sugar is there, and if we are taking sugar solution also sugar is there. Sugar is the form of C6H12O6. So when yeast combines with the sugar, what will happen? That will leads to the formation of carbon dioxide. After some time, bubbles are seen in the yeast mixture. This shows that carbon dioxide gas is being produced. The gas passed into the lime water turns it milky. This confirms that carbon dioxide is a product of fermentation by yeast. This lime water turns milky due to the presence of carbon dioxide gas. This is the carbon dioxide gas. Yeast ferments sugar in the absence of oxygen and produces carbon dioxide gas and ethanol. Ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy are the products obtained by fermentation of yeast. This is an example for anaerobic fermentation because here is no oxygen. So here comes the activity 5.5. Add yeast to sugar solution or fruit juice. Connect the test tube to lime water. After some time, lime water turns milky. Reason, yeast carries out anaerobic respiration of fermentation and releases carbon dioxide. Conclusion, fermentation produces carbon dioxide and ethanol. Quick revision, for aerobic respiration, oxygen is needed. End products as carbon dioxide and water. Energy released is more. And in anaerobic or yeast, oxygen is needed is no oxygen is needed. End products is ethanol and carbon dioxide. Energy released is less. In muscle respiration, oxygen needed is low, oxygen is required, and end products is lactic acid, and energy released is also less. So respiration is a biochemical process in which food is broken down inside cells to release energy required for life activities. We have discussed nutrition in organisms in the last section. The food material taken in during the process of nutrition is used in cells to provide energy for various life processes. Diverse organisms do this in different ways. Some use oxygen to break down glucose completely into carbon dioxide and water. Some use other pathways that do not involve oxygen. In all cases, the first step is the breakdown of glucose, a 6 carbon molecule, into a 3 carbon molecule called pyruvate. This process takes place in the cytoplasm. Further, the pyruvate may be converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide. This process takes place in yeast during fermentation. Since this process takes place in the absence of air or oxygen, it is called anaerobic respiration. The breakdown of pyruvate using oxygen takes place in the mitochondria. Breakdown of pyruvate using oxygen takes place in the mitochondria. And the first step involved is the breakdown of glucose, a 6 carbon compound, into a 3 carbon molecule called pyruvate. This process takes place in cytoplasm. And after that, this pyruvate may be converted to ethanol and carbon dioxide. and this process takes place in yeast during fermentation, and this happens in the absence of oxygen, hence it is called anaerobic respiration. Okay, breakdown of pyruvate using oxygen takes place in mitochondria, and this pyruvate breakdown happens or occurs in mitochondria, whereas the breakdown of glucose into a 3 carbon molecule pyruvate occurs in cytoplasm. This process breaks up the 3 carbon pyruvate molecule to give 3 molecules of carbon dioxide. The other product is water. Since the process takes place in the presence of air, oxygen, it is called aerobic respiration. The release of energy in this aerobic process is lot greater than the anaerobic process. Sometimes when there is lack of oxygen in our muscles, another pathway for the breakdown of pyruvate is taken. Here the pyruvate is converted into lactic acid, which is also a 3 carbon molecule. This buildup of lactic acid in our muscles during sudden activity causes cramps and fatigues. So basically in this respiration section there are talking about 3 main sections, that is, one is aerobic respiration, second one is anaerobic respiration, and third one is lactic acid respiration. Here you can see that glucose 6 carbon compound in cytoplasm is converted to 3 carbon pyruvate molecule plus energy, and after this further mechanisms occurs. This pyruvate in the absence of oxygen and presence of yeast convert to ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Ethanol is a 2 carbon molecule. The formula is C2H5OH, and carbon dioxide plus energy. And in the lack of oxygen in our muscle cells, the pyruvate is converted into a 3 carbon molecule lactic acid plus energy that cause cramps. And in the presence of oxygen in mitochondria, this get converted into carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. Breakdown of glucose by various pathways. The energy released during cellular respiration is immediately used to synthesize a molecule called ATP. The energy released during the cellular respiration is immediately used to synthesize a molecule called ATP, which is used to fuel all other activities in the cell. In these processes, ATP is broken down, giving rise to a fixed amount of energy which can derive the endothermic reactions taking place in the cell. Breakdown of glucose. Glucose is broken down into pyruvate. In the cytoplasm, glucose 6 carbon molecule breaks down into pyruvate 3 carbon molecule and a small amount of energy. Glucose 6 carbon gives pyruvate 3 carbon plus energy. After pyruvate is formed, it can follow 3 different pathways. One is absence of oxygen in yeast. Pyruvate is converted to ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. This process is called fermentation or anaerobic respiration. Then pyruvate converted to ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy. Example is yeast used in baking and alcohol production. Next one is lack of oxygen in muscle cells. That is, when we perform vigorous exercise, muscles may not receive enough oxygen. Pyruvate is converted to lactic acid energy. Pyruvate is converted to lactic acid plus energy, result in accumulation of lactic acid, causes muscles cramps and fatigue. And in the presence of oxygen in mitochondria, when oxygen is available, pyruvate is completely broken down into carbon dioxide, water, large amount of energy. This is called aerobic respiration. Pyruvate plus oxygen gives carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. Key point: aerobic respiration releases much more energy than anaerobic respiration. So, three conditions we have discussed. First one, the aerobic respiration. Second one, anaerobic respiration, that means mainly happens in yeast. And third one, in muscles, that lead to the formation of lactic acid. Next one is ATP. ATP is the energy currency of cell. ATP full form is adenosine triphosphate. It's the molecule that stores and supplies energy for cellular activities. Think of ATP as a rechargeable battery of the cell. Formation of ATP. The energy released during respiration is used to convert ADP into ATP. ADP plus phosphorus plus energy gives ATP, where ADP is adenosine diphosphate and P is phosphate group. Breakdown of ATP. When cells need energy, ATP breaks down. ATP plus water gives ADP plus phosphorus plus energy. So, in all these examples or all these cases, energy is released. Here energy is released, here energy is released, here also energy is released. What is this energy? The energy lies in the form of ATP. ATP means adenosine triphosphate. That is the energy currency of the cell. Adenosine triphosphate is the molecule that stores and supplies energy for cellular activities. Think of ATP as a rechargeable battery of the cell. You can consider this ATP as a rechargeable battery of the cell. Energy released during respiration is used to convert ADP into ATP. How this ATP is formed? ADP or adenosine diphosphate combines with the 1 phosphorus plus energy to form ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate. Breakdown of ATP. When cells need energy, ATP breakdowns. When the cells needs energy, for example, if I have made my mind to study, what needs energy is needed. So how this energy is released? Energy is released by breaking down ATP. ATP is broken with the help of water and it forms ADP, adenosine diphosphate and phosphorus plus energy. About 30.5 kilojoule per mole of energy is released. While from 1 ATP we will get 30.5 kilojoule per mole of energy. Uses of ATP. ATP provides energy for muscle contraction, protein synthesis, nerve impulse conduction, active transport and other cellular activities. So ATP provides the energy for protein synthesis, muscle contraction, nerve impulse conduction, active transport and other cellular activities. ATP. ATP is the energy currency for most cellular processes. The energy released during the process of respiration is used to make an ATP molecule from ADP and inorganic phosphate. ADP plus phosphorus gives ADP plus phosphorus in the presence of energy gives ATP. P is phosphate. Endothermic processes in the cell then use this ATP to drive these reactions. When the thermal phosphate linkage in ATP is broken using water, the energy equivalent to 30.5 kilojoule per mole is released. Think of how a battery can provide energy for many different kinds of uses. It can be used to obtain mechanical energy, light energy, electrical energy, and so on. Similarly, ATP can be used in the cells for the contraction of muscles, protein synthesis, conduction of nervous impulses, and many other activities. So, ATP can be used by the cells for many activities like muscle contraction, protein synthesis, conduction of nerve impulses, and many other activities. So breaking down, ATP releases how much energy? 30.5 kilojoule per mole of energy is released. Glucose is first converted into pyruvate in the cytoplasm. Glucose is 6 carbon compound, C6H12O6, converted to pyrocarbon, that is 3 carbon compound. And when no oxygen is needed in the yeast, it is converted to ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy. In muscles or in the presence of low oxygen or in muscles, it gets converted to lactic acid and energy. Oxygen present in mitochondria converts it into carbon dioxide, water, and large energy. In the presence of oxygen, always remember that a large amount of energy is released. But in balance other cases, for example, low oxygen in muscles or no oxygen in the presence of anaerobic respiration, in the case of yeast, low energy is released. Why is ATP called the energy currency of the cell? ATP stores energy released during respiration and supplies it to whenever required for cellular activities. Hence, it is called the energy currency of the cell. So, in the process of respiration, what is released? ATP is released, and ATP is called as the energy currency of the cell. Wherever the cellular activities are needed, there ATP is required, and this ATP is provided through respiration. Explain. And the explanation of this page: gas exchange in plants. This page explains about the respiration in plants and animals and introduces human breathing. Gas exchange in plants. Plants do not have special respiratory organs like lungs. We have lungs for breathing, but plants do not have any respiratory organs. How do plants exchange gases? Through tiny pores called stomata present on leaves. Through large intercellular spaces inside the plant tissues, exchange occurs by diffusion. So, in plants, the exchange of gases takes place mainly through stomata, and other than stomata, through large intercellular spaces inside the plant tissues. In plant tissues, there are certain intercellular spaces, and from through this intercellular space also, the gas transportation or gas exchange takes place. And other than this too, the exchange occurs also by diffusion. During the day, photosynthesis occurs. Carbon dioxide produced during respiration is used for photosynthesis. Oxygen is released in larger amounts. So, during the day, the photosynthesis occurs. Carbon dioxide produced during respiration is used for photosynthesis. Oxygen is released in larger amounts. And during the day, what happens? The process called photosynthesis occurs. And for photosynthesis, what is needed? Carbon dioxide is needed and oxygen is released. That's why we will say that plant more trees, plant more trees, plant more trees. Why planting more trees? Because it releases that much oxygen, fresh oxygen. So, carbon dioxide is produced carbon dioxide produced as a result of respiration is used in photosynthesis, and oxygen is released in larger amounts. That happens during the day. And during the night, photosynthesis stops. Only respiration occurs. Oxygen is taken in and carbon dioxide is released. But that occurs very low. So during the night, in the normal case, photosynthesis stops. But in the case of desert plants, it will be opposite of that. That we will study later. So during the night, photosynthesis stops. Only respiration occurs. Oxygen is taken. in and carbon dioxide is released. And gas exchange in animals. Animals require oxygen and must remove carbon dioxide. Terrestrial animals, land animals. Animals are same to us. What we do? We inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Similarly, animals also use oxygen from the atmosphere and remove carbon dioxide. Terrestrial animals like land animals use oxygen from the atmosphere. Example, humans, dogs, cows. And aquatic animals, they use dissolved oxygen in water. Example, fish. Activity 5.6. What is the specialty in activity 5.6? Okay. Observe fish in an aquarium. They open and close their mouths and the gill slits or the operculum which covers the gill slit behind their eyes also open and close. Are the timings of the opening and closing of mouth gill slits coordinated in some manner? Count the number of times the fish opens and closes its mouth in a minute. Compare this to the number of times you breathe in and out in a minute. Okay, that's a good activity. How many of your houses has aquarium? Okay, then observe or do this activity carefully. Observe fish opens and closes its mouth. Gill slits also open and close. Why? Water enters through the mouth and pass over the gills. Oh, water enters through the mouth. From mouth or to the mouth, water enters and then the water passes through gills. The gill absorb dissolved oxygen from water and releases carbon dioxide. Okay. In fishes, they don't have lungs. Instead of lungs, they have gills. Important observation. Fish breathe faster than humans because water contains much less oxygen than air. Therefore, fishes must pass a large amount of water over through their gills to obtain sufficient oxygen. And compared to humans, the fish breathing rate or breath is faster because compared to atmosphere, the water present in liquid or water, oxygen present in water is very low. So fish must pass a large amount of water over their gills to obtain the sufficient oxygen. It's a break time. We will take a short break. We will return after 10 minutes. Welcome back to the next session. So, comparing to the fish and humans, whose breathing rate is faster? Fish. Just we can check the fish breathing rate, how much it will be. Breathing rate of fish. Many fish show about 30 to 100 gill movements per minute. Okay. In the case of humans, it is 72. Nearly 72. This is the gills. Gills present in the fish. Gills. Why do respiratory surfaces have large surface area? Efficient gas exchange requires large surface area, thin surface, and moist surface. So, what are the criteria for good exchange, good gas exchange media? It should have large surface area, the surface area should be thin, and it should be moist. This allows oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse quickly. So, a good respiratory surface should be thin, it should be large surface area, thin, and should be moist. That is essential for the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Human respiratory passage. Air enters the body through the following route: nostrils, nasal cavity, throat, windpipe or trachea, and to lungs. Functions of nostrils. The filter dust particles, trap germs, warm and moisten incoming air. Nasal hairs present inside nostrils prevent dust from entering lungs. Lines the air passage. Traps dust and microorganisms. So, functions of nostrils are filter dust particles, trap germs, warm and moisten the incoming air. Nasal hairs present inside the nostrils prevent the dust from entering lungs. And mucus lines the air passage, traps dust and microorganisms. Rings of cartilage. The windpipe contains cartilaginous rings. It prevents the windpipe from collapsing and keeps the airway open. So, humans respiratory passage. The figure should be here. Yes. The human respiratory passage contains, first is starting from the nostrils, then nasal cavity, then throat, then windpipe or trachea, and finally to lungs. And what are the functions of nostrils? Nostrils. These are nostrils. Nostrils filter the dust particles, trap the germs, that is microorganism will be trapped, filtering of the dust will occur, and warm and moisten the incoming air. It will warm, make it little hot and moisten the incoming air. That is good for the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And nasal hairs. Nasal hairs means the hairs that are present in the nostrils. That also prevent the dust from entering the lungs. And mucus lines the air passage, traps dust and microorganisms. Lines the air passage, traps dust and microorganisms. It will be little sticky. And rings of cartilage are the windpipe that contains cartilaginous rings. Function prevents the windpipe from collapsing and keeps the airway open. So it prevents, or the rings of cartilage prevents the windpipe from collapsing and keeps the airway open. So in the figure you can see human respiratory system. Here nasal passage is there, and trachea. Trachea is also known as windpipe. Windpipe. Then we have pharynx, larynx. Here it is the rings of cartilages, and here you can see lungs. These are ribs, and here you can see diaphragm, and the two divisions are called bronchi, and from small branches arise that are called bronchioles, and last the tip, that is little bulged or balloon like structure, is called alveolar sac. The respiratory bronchioles, alveoli. These are the enlarged figure of this session. Since the amount of dissolved oxygen is fairly low as compared to the amount of oxygen in the air, the rate of breathing in aquatic organisms is much faster than that seen in terrestrial organisms. Fishes take in water through their mouths and force it past the gills, where the dissolved oxygen is taken up by blood. Terrestrial organisms use the oxygen in the atmosphere for respiration. The oxygen is absorbed by different organs in the different animals. All these organs have a structure that increases the surface area which is in contact with the oxygen-rich atmosphere. Since the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide has to take place across this surface is very fine and delicate. In order to protect this surface, it is usually placed within the body, so there have to be passages that will take air to this area. In addition, there is a mechanism for moving the air in and out of this area where the oxygen is absorbed. In human beings, air is taken into the body through nostrils. The air passing through the nostrils is filtered by fine hairs that line the passage. The passage is also lined with mucus, which helps in this process. From here, the air passes through the throat and into the lungs. The rings of cartilage are present in the throat. These ensure that the air passage does not collapse. And what are the functions of these rings of cartilage? The rings of cartilage prevents the windpipe from collapsing and keeps the airway open. Quick revision. Plants, gas exchange through stomata. Day, oxygen is released, and in the night, carbon dioxide is released. Fish respire through gills, use dissolved oxygen in water, breathe faster than terrestrial animals. Air enters through nostrils, nasal hair and mucus filter air, cartilage rings keep the trachea open. Why do fish breathe faster than humans? Water contains much less dissolved oxygen than air. Therefore, fish must breathe faster to obtain enough oxygen through their gills. Explain. Next paragraph explanation. Human respiratory system. Labels in the figure. Nostrils, trachea or windpipe, bronchi, bronchioles, alveolar sacs, alveoli, lungs, ribs, diaphragms. Path of air in humans. Nostrils, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. The trachea divides into two bronchi, one entering each lung. The bronchi further divide into smaller bronchioles which end in tiny balloon-like sacs called alveoli. So the trachea divides into two bronchi, one entering each lung. The bronchi further divided into smaller bronchioles which end in tiny balloon-like sacs called alveoli. What are alveoli? Alveoli are tiny sacs present inside the lungs. Importance of alveoli. Provide a large surface area for gas exchange. Have thin walls surrounded by many blood capillaries. This makes diffusion of gases very efficient. So what are alveoli? Alveoli are tiny air sacs present inside the lungs. You can see in the figure, that is the bulged image. This balloon like or small bulged or small berry like structure is called alveoli at the tip of the bronchioles. So alveoli are tiny air sacs present inside the lungs. Importance of alveoli: provide a large surface area for gas exchange. Have thin walls surrounded by many blood capillaries. This makes diffusion of gases very efficient. So alveoli has large surface area, have thin walls, and it is also surrounded by a large amount of blood capillaries. So it makes the surface thin and large. Also, it contains a surrounded by a many number of blood capillaries that all lead to the exchange of gases faster. The trachea divides it into two bronchi, one entering each lung. The bronchi further divide into smaller bronchioles, which end in tiny balloon-like structure sacs called alveoli. Exchange of gases in alveoli: oxygen, exchange of gases in alveoli. Oxygen from inhaled air enters the blood through alveolar walls. Carbon dioxide from the blood enters the alveoli and is breathed out. Remember, alveoli are the actual sites of gaseous exchange in humans. So oxygen from inhaled air enters the blood through alveolar walls, and from carbon dioxide from blood enters the alveoli and is breathed out. And first oxygen goes to alveoli and from alveoli to blood, and from blood the oxygen goes to different cells and tissues, and from there respiration occurs, and as a result formed carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide will enter to the blood and from blood to alveoli and is breathed out. Remember, alveoli are the actual sites of gaseous exchange in humans. Mechanism of breathing: inhalation or breathing in. Ribs move upward and downward. Ribs move upward and outward. Diaphragm flattens. Result: chest cavity becomes larger. Air is sucked into the lungs. Exhalation: breathing out. Ribs move downward and inward. Diaphragm becomes dome shaped. Result: chest cavity becomes smaller. Air is pushed out. So in the case of mechanism of breathing, inhalation means breathing in. That means rib moves forward and out. Ribs move upward and outward. Ribs move outward, also upward. Right, we move some upward, also the ribs moves forward or outward. Diaphragm flattens. Diaphragm will become flat. Result: chest cavity becomes larger. Air is sucked into the lungs. And in the case of exhalation, the ribs is downward. So ribs is moved inward and also it is moved downward. Diaphragm becomes dome shaped. Result, chest cavity becomes smaller, air is pushed out. Why is some air always left in the lungs? Even after exhalation, some air remains in the lungs. Advantage, provides enough time for oxygen absorption, allows continuous oxygen exchange of gases. This is called residual volume of air. So after exhalation also, inhale, exhale. After completion of this exhale also, a little amount of little amount of air is present inside the lungs. This air will be present even though after a complete exhalation, because to provide continuous exchange of gases and also give enough time for oxygen absorption. Role of hemoglobin. Large animals cannot depend only on diffusion for oxygen transport. Hemoglobin, respiratory pigment present in RBCs, has a high affinity for oxygen. Carries oxygen from lungs to all body cells. So hemoglobin contains the respiratory pigments called the hemoglobins are the respiratory pigment present in red blood cells, and this hemoglobin has high affinity for oxygen. They combine with oxygen and forms complex, and they carry the oxygen from lungs to all body cells. So in our case and also large animals, the oxygen reaches the corresponding cells through this hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is present in RBC. Transport of carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen. Therefore, most carbon dioxide is transported in dissolved form in blood plasma. So carbon dioxide is transported in a dissolved form in the blood plasma. And also carbon dioxide is more soluble in water as compared to oxygen. Quick revision. Site of gas exchange is alveoli. Oxygen carries hemoglobin. During inhalation, ribs up and out. Diaphragm flattens, air enters lungs. And during exhalation, ribs down in and diaphragm relaxes, air leaves lungs. 1 mark questions. What are alveoli? Tiny balloon-like air sacs in the lungs where gases exchange occurs. Why are alveoli suitable for gas exchange? They have a large surface area, thin walls, and rich blood supply. What is the function of hemoglobin? It carries or transports oxygen from the lungs to the body tissues. Why does some air remain in the lungs after exhalation? To allow continuous exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So coming to the textbook. Within the lungs, the passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes which finally terminate in balloon-like structures which are called alveoli. Alveoli or single alveolars. The alveoli provide a surface where the exchange of gases takes place. The walls of the alveoli contain an extensive network of blood vessels. As we have seen in earlier years, when we breathe in, we lift our ribs and flatten our diaphragm, and the chest cavity becomes larger as a result. Because of this, air is sucked into the lungs and fills the expanded alveoli. The blood brings carbon dioxide from the rest of the body for release into alveoli, and the oxygen in the alveolar air is taken up by blood in the alveolar blood vessel to be transported to the cells of the body. What is this telling? Within the lungs, the passage divides it into smaller and smaller tubes which finally terminate into a balloon-like structure which we call alveoli. That's clear. Alveoli is like a balloon-like structure, and there are tubes. The passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes that are called bronchioles. Bronchioles are tube-like structures. There will be two bronchi, primary bronchs, 1, 2, and the bronchi is again divided into branches-like structures, tubular structures that are called bronchioles, and tip of the bronchioles is balloon-like or sac-like and is called alveoli. Singular is alveolus. Balloon-like structure. The alveoli provide surface area where the exchange of gases takes place. Okay. And what was the main peculiarity or particularities of alveolar sac cell wall or alveolar surface wall? Surface. It is thin. It has large surface area, and it is moist. The walls, the alveoli provide surface where the exchange of gases takes place. The walls of the alveoli contain extensive network of blood vessels. Also, the wall or surface of the alveoli contains an extensive network of blood vessels. A large number of blood vessels are present in the alveolar surface. So, the main three characteristics of alveolar wall is or alveolar surface is it is thin, it has large surface area. You can assume that if it is thin only, exchange of gases easily occurs. If it is thick, exchange will be difficult, and it needs large surface area for large amount of exchange, and it also contains large amount of blood vessels. As we have seen in earlier years, when we breathe in, we lift our ribs, flatten our diaphragm, and the chest cavity becomes larger as a result. So when we breathe, the chest or lungs expands, and the ribs comes upwards and outward, and also our diaphragm will become flattened. And when we exhale, the opposite of it occurs. That is, when we exhale, our diaphragm will be a dome shaped structure. Also, the ribs will be inward and downward towards ourselves and to inward. It will little collapse, and also our chest cavity or lungs cavity will shorten. Because of this, the air is sucked into lungs and fill the expanded alveoli. The blood brings carbon dioxide from the rest of the body for release into the alveoli. First, the oxygen we inhale. Oxygen is inhaled. Oxygen goes to the windpipe or trachea, then to the bronchi, then to the bronchioles, then to the alveolar sac. From the alveolar sac, oxygen is transferred to blood streams, and from blood it goes to different cells, and from the cell or respiration occurs, and from that the end product carbon dioxide then again blood passes through or flows through blood and reaches the blood network and reaches the alveoli, alveolar to bronchioles, bronchioles to bronchi, bronchi to trachea, trachea to nostrils, and then finally get out of the body. The blood brings carbon dioxide from the rest of the body for release into the alveoli, and the oxygen in the alveolar air is taken up by blood in the alveolar blood vessels to be transported to all the cells in the body. During the breathing cycle, when air is taken in and left out, the lungs always contain a residual volume of air so that there is sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed and carbon dioxide to be released. So even though after exhalation, for example, inhale, exhale, after exhaling that carbon dioxide, a little amount of air will be remaining in the lungs. That is called a residual air or residual volume of air. That will stay there because it is needed, because it provides the sufficient time for oxygen. Next oxygen should be coming now. So that oxygen to be absorbed and for the coming carbon dioxide to be released. To provide that little gap or sufficient time for the next cycle to restart. That's why a residual volume of air always stays in the lungs. When the body size of animals is large, the diffusion pressure alone cannot take care of oxygen delivery to all parts of the body. Instead, respiratory pigments take up oxygen from the air in the lungs and carry it to the tissues which are deficient in oxygen before releasing it. In human beings, the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which has a very high affinity for oxygen. This pigment is present in the RBC. Carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than the oxygen, and hence is mostly transported in the dissolved form in our blood. So, comparing two gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen, which is more soluble in water. Carbon dioxide has more solubility in water. Carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen, and hence it is mostly transported in the dissolved form in our blood. Also, in human beings, the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which has high affinity for oxygen. This pigment is present in RBC. So, how does the oxygen enters from alveoli to blood, and in the blood, what will happen? Blood contains RBC. RBC is red blood corpuscles. Red blood corpuscles contains which pigment? Hemoglobin pigment. Hemoglobin is containing an element which is that iron. Okay, hemoglobin combines with oxygen, and this hemoglobin transport this oxygen to different parts of the body or different cells or the end cells. So hemoglobin carries the oxygen. And some of the facts, that is, smoking is injurious to health. Lung cancer is one of the common diseases of deaths in the world. The upper part of the respiratory tract is provided with a small hair-like structures called cilia. These cilia help to remove germs, dust and other harmful particles from inhaled air. Smoking destroys this hair, due to which germs, dust, smoke and other harmful chemicals enter lungs and cause infection, cough and even lung cancer. So what happened during smoking? Smoking not only damages lungs, but also it damages the hair inside the nostrils. And what is the function of this hair? This hair prevents the entry of germs, dust, smoke, etc. from entering the lungs. But if you smoke, what happens? The smoking air or the smoke created in that destroys that hair cells, and when the hair are removed or hairs are destroyed, the germs, dust, smoke, etc. enters easily through the nostrils and it enters the lungs. And by smoking, it's the major disease or common cause of smoking is lung cancer. More tobacco directly or any product of tobacco in the form of cigarettes, BDs, hookah, gutka, etc. is harmful. Use of tobacco most commonly affects the tongue, lungs, heart and liver. Smokeless tobacco is also a major risk factor for heart attacks, strokes, pulmonary diseases and several forms of cancers. There is a high incidence of oral cancer in India due to the chewing of tobacco in the form of gutka. Stay healthy. Just say no to tobacco and its products. So, never smoke. Smoking causes cancer. Smoking of cigarettes, BDs, hookah, gutka, all causes lung cancer. Affects the tongue, lungs, heart and liver. Cause heart attacks, strokes, pulmonary diseases and several forms of cancers. In India, the main cancer is oral cancer. So, say no to tobacco. No tobacco, no. Not today. Now we can do a quick revision of the topics that we have studied today. What is this? Glucose 6 carbon gives pyruvate to 3 carbon, and in pathway 1 that gives, or in the presence in no oxygen or yeast. Without yeast it will produce ethanol and carbon dioxide and energy. And with less oxygen in muscles it creates lactic acid, and when oxygen is present in mitochondria it creates carbon dioxide, water and energy. Yes. First it forms ethanol and carbon dioxide, then lactic acid in muscles and carbon dioxide and water in the mitochondria or in the presence of oxygen. One line revision: respiration is the breakdown of food to release energy. Aerobic respiration with oxygen, anaerobic respiration without oxygen. Fermentation occurs in yeast. Lactic acid causes muscle cramps. ATP is the energy currency of the cell. Alveoli are the sites of gaseous exchange. Hemoglobin transport oxygen. Fish use gills for respiration. Stomato helps plants exchange gases. Super important exam questions. Why does lime water turn milky when we exhale into it? Exhaled air contains carbon dioxide which turns lime water milky. Okay. Why do muscle cramp during heavy exercise? Due to accumulation of lactic acid caused by lack of oxygen. Why is ATP called the energy currency of the cell? ATP stores and supplies energy for cellular activities. What is the function of hemoglobin? It transports oxygen from lungs to body tissues. Why do fishes breathe faster than humans? Because the respiratory organ in fish is gills. What is gills compared to lungs? Water contains, fish breathe faster than humans because when compared to atmosphere, when comparison of water to atmosphere, the oxygen present in atmosphere is high than the dissolved oxygen present in water. So fishes get only little amount of oxygen. So for getting that oxygen they have to breathe fast, or breathing rate should be very fast. So fish breathe faster than humans. Mnemonics. Mnemonics is not needed. 10 rapid MCQs. Site of gaseous exchange of lungs. Site of gaseous exchange of lungs is alveoli. Respiratory pigment in humans, hemoglobin. Fermentation occurs in yeast. Muscle cramps are caused by lactic acid. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. Fish respire through gills. Gas released during fermentation. Carbon dioxide. Site of aerobic respiration. Mitochondria. Gas exchange in plants occurs mainly through stomata. Pyruvate is formed in cytoplasm. Yes, score 10 out of 10. Excellent, you have understood aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration, fermentation in yeast, lactic acid fermentation, ATP, alveoli, hemoglobin, fish respiration, plant gas exchange, etc. Ultra quick revision in 30 seconds. Glucose to pyruvate, no oxygen in the yeast. Ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy, less oxygen in muscles, lactic acid plus energy, oxygen plus in mitochondria, carbon dioxide plus water plus more energy. ATP is energy currency of the cell. Alveoli is the site of gas exchange. Hemoglobin is the oxygen carrier. Fish respire through gills and plants through stomata. Ten hordes assertion or reason questions. Oh my god. Okay, challenge accepted. Assertion: lime water turns milky when exhaled air is passed through it. Lime water turns milky when exhaled gas is passed through it. Exhaled air contains carbon dioxide. So when carbon dioxide is combining with lime water, it forms lime water turns milky. Exhaled air contains more carbon dioxide than atmospheric air. Yes, that is truth. That's why we done one activity by blowing to a test tube containing milky water, and we inject air into a test tube containing milky water. Which of the test tube containing lime water turned milky faster? To that test tube through which we blown the air, because it contains exhaled air. So exhaled air contains more carbon dioxide than atmospheric air. That is true. So lime water turns milky when exhaled air is passed through it, because exhaled air contains more carbon dioxide than atmospheric air. That is true. And both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. Explanation. Exhaled air contains more carbon dioxide. When carbon dioxide passes through lime water, it reacts and turns the lime water milky. Therefore, the reason correctly explains assertion. Assertion. During vigorous exercise, muscles cell undergo anaerobic respiration. Yeah, there will be low oxygen, so there will be a chance for anaerobic respiration. The supply of oxygen to muscles become insufficient during heavy exercise. Okay, that's true. During vigorous exercise, muscle cells undergo anaerobic respiration because the supply of oxygen to muscles became insufficient during heavy exercise. That's true. A and R are correct, and R is the correct explanation of A. During heavy exercise, muscles need more energy than the oxygen supply can provide. Therefore, muscles switch to anaerobic respiration, producing lactic acid. Fish breathe faster than humans, right? The amount of dissolved oxygen in water is much lower than the amount of oxygen in air. That's true. A and R are right. R is the right explanation of A. Alveoli provide a large surface area for gaseous exchange, right? Alveoli have thick walls that prevent gases from escaping. No, alveolar wall is very thin wall, large surface area, a large number of blood capillaries. That all are the specialities or the peculiarities of the alveoli, and these peculiarities, these specialities makes alveoli helpful in exchange of gases or easy exchange of gases. So A is true, R is false. Assertion is true. Alveoli provide a very large surface area for efficient gas exchange. Reason is false. Alveoli have thin walls, not thick walls. Thin walls help oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse rapidly. Assertion. ATP5 is called the energy currency of the cell. Sorry, ATP is called the energy currency of the cell. That's right. ATP stores energy released during respiration. ATP stores energy released during respiration and provide it for cellular activities. That's right. A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. ATP stores energy released during respiration. When the cells need energy, ATP breaks down and releases it. Therefore, ATP acts like an energy currency, transferring energy wherever needed. Plants respire only at night. Yes. Photosynthesis occurs only during daytime. No, plants respire night and morning also. Night and daytime also. So A is false, R is true. D. Assertion is false. Plants respire all the time, day and night. Photosynthesis occurs only in the presence of sunlight, generally during the day. Only during the sunlight or in the presence of sunlight, the plants can make food. So photosynthesis occurs only in daytime. In the case of respiration and photosynthesis, plants case is same as ourselves. We respire every time during our daytime, nighttime, even in sleep also we respire. Similarly, plant also respires, and we also make food. When will we make food? From day to night, day to evening, or up to night. But in night we are never, majority never cook food, and difference is, and others are different. So 90 or 95 percentage of the people doesn't cook food at night. Similarly, plants also doesn't cook at food, means prepare their food or do photosynthesis at night because they do not get enough sunlight. Hemoglobin helps in the transport of oxygen. True, because oxygen is not sufficiently soluble in blood plasma to meet the body's need. Oxygen is not sufficiently soluble in blood plasma to meet the body's need. Yes. A. Assertion is true. Hemoglobin transport oxygen from lungs to the body tissues. Reason is true. Oxygen is only slightly soluble in plasma, so hemoglobin is needed to carry most of the oxygen. The reason correct explains the assertion. Assertion A. Anaerobic respiration releases less energy than aerobic respiration. That's true. In the case of aerobic respiration, more energy is released. In anaerobic respiration, glucose is not completely broken down. Maybe it's confusing. We can give it a. Yes, both are correct. Aerobic respiration completely breaks down glucose into carbon dioxide and water, releasing a large amount of energy. Whereas anaerobic respiration only partially breaks down glucose, so less energy is released. Therefore, the reason correctly explains the assertion. That I have a doubt, just ask ChatGPT why is it so. Why? Explain. And question 9, diaphragm moves downward and becomes flatter during inhalation. That's true. This increases the volume of chest cavity, allowing air to enter the lungs. A. Yes, that's correct. But we can just look the explanation of the previous question. Why does anaerobic respiration release less energy? Think of glucose as fully loaded fuel tank. Okay. In aerobic respiration with oxygen, glucose molecule is broken, almost all the stored energy is released. Okay. In anaerobic respiration without oxygen, glucose is only partially breakdown. For example, in yeast, glucose is converted to ethanol and carbon dioxide plus more energy. Notice the ethanol still contains a lot of chemical energy because some energy remains trapped in ethanol or lactic acid in muscles. The cell cannot extract all the energy from glucose. Okay, some energy is trapped in the ethanol and also in lactic acid. Here the energy is trapped or remained stored in the end products like ethanol or lactic acid. To get energy, this ethanol or lactic acid needs to be again broken down so that we can get the energy. So the 9th question answer is A. Both A and R are true. R is the correct explanation of A. During inhalation or breathing in, diaphragm contracts in and move downward. It becomes flatter. The ribs move upward and outward. This increases the volume of chest cavity. The air pressure inside the lungs decreases. Air crushes into the lungs from outside. Inhale means inflate. Diaphragm downwards, chest cavity bigger, air enters. Exhale means deflate. Diaphragms upward, dome-shaped chest cavity becomes lesser, air leaves the lungs. You have a strong grasp on the respiration topic. Before sleeping today, revise these 5 keywords once. Glucose, pyruvate, ATP, alveoli, hemoglobin. Perfect timing. Let's take another 10 minutes of break for little refreshment or relaxation. See you after 10 minutes. Let's come to the next topic, that is transportation. Transportation in human beings. Heart, transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide, blood pressure, maintenance of platelets, lymph, transportation in plants, transport of water, transport of food and other substances. Okay. Before going to that transportation, we can do some of the questions that is given in the NCRT. Explain the answer. Explain the questions. Answer the questions. First question is, what advantage over an aquatic organism does a terrestrial organism have with regard to obtaining oxygen for respiration? In the atmosphere itself, the amount of oxygen is very high as compared to the aquatic or the dissolved oxygen present in the water. So, if a terrestrial organism that is living in the land is in contact to the atmosphere, gets a large amount of oxygen that he can use or utilize for respiration. Terrestrial organisms obtain oxygen from air, which contains much more oxygen than water. Therefore, they can obtain oxygen more easily and do not need to breathe as rapidly as aquatic organisms like fish. Yeah. What are the different ways in which glucose is oxidized to provide energy in various organisms? In the case of mitochondria or cellular respiration or full respiration, glucose is converted to carbon dioxide, water, and energy. In the case of yeast or fermentation, glucose is converted into C2H5OH or alcohol plus carbon dioxide plus low energy. And in anaerobic respiration or in the absence of air, it is converted to that is the case as yeast or fermentation or anaerobic respiration. And in the case of muscles, where the oxygen is very low due to rapid or vigorous muscle activities or workouts, the oxygen will be low in muscles, and as a result, the energy or the food or the carbohydrate or the glucose get oxidized to lactic acid and low amount of energy. Glucose is first broken down to pyruvate in the cytoplasm. The pyruvate may be converted into ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy in yeast in the absence of oxygen, lactic acid plus energy in muscle cells due to lack of oxygen, carbon dioxide plus water plus large amount of energy in mitochondria due to presence of oxygen. How are oxygen and carbon dioxide transported in human beings? Oxygen enters the nostrils, windpipe, trachea, bronchioles, alveolar sacs, blood to cells, and from there carbon dioxide from cells to blood to alveolus to bronchioles to bronchi to trachea to windpipe to nostrils to atmospheric air. Oxygen is transported in bloodstream with the help of a pigment hemoglobin that is present in RBC. Oxygen is transmitted by the hemoglobin present in RBC from the lungs to the body tissues, whereas carbon dioxide is transported mainly in dissolved form in the blood plasma from body tissues to the lungs. Carbon dioxide is transported mainly in dissolved form. Carbon dioxide is transported mainly in dissolved form in the blood plasma from body tissues to the lungs. So, carbon dioxide is transported in the form of a dissolved form in the blood plasma from the tissues to the alveoli. How are the lungs designed in human beings to maximize the area for exchange of gases? The lungs have large surface area, very thin, and it is moist. These features help the transfer of or exchange of gases or exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide easier and faster. Lungs contain millions of tiny balloon-like sacs called alveoli. These alveoli provide a very large surface area for exchange of gas, have thin walls, are richly supplied with the blood capillaries. They are also richly supplied with the blood capillaries. So lungs, it's not about the lungs. The lungs contains contains balloon-like structures called alveoli, and this alveolar wall is large, large, thin, and contain a large amount of blood capillaries. These features ensure efficient exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Exam keywords: air has more oxygen than water. Glucose is converted to pyruvate. Hemoglobin transport oxygen. Carbon dioxide transported in dissolved form. Alveoli, large surface area for exchange of gases. So next is transportation. Explain transportation. So transportation. The page introduces transportation in human beings and explains the role of the heart in blood circulation. Why is transportation needed? So this page introduces transportation in human beings and explains the role of the heart in blood circulation. Why is transportation needed? Every cell in the body needs food, nutrients, oxygen, removal of carbon dioxide and other wastes. Blood performs this transport. We have millions of cells in our body. We can just ask, how many cells are there in the body? How many cells are there in the body? They are in human body. Human body. 37 trillion cells. My God. Different types of cells include RBC, nerve cells, muscle cells, skin cells, bone cells. 39 trillions. So this 37 trillion cells has to get food. Every cell in the body needs food or nutrients, oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide and other wastes. All of you, please one time pray to the God or that infinite source of power or your ideology or just a thank you to the universe for giving this beautiful body. Imagine that body with 37 trillion cells, and every time we inhale we take oxygen, and the same span of the time or in the spell of a second carbon dioxide is released from these cells and the carbon dioxide is exhaled, then also inhalation, then exhalation, and this in each second the cells receive, each cells requires food, oxygen, nutrients, that all are required to the cells. So human body is just amazing, extraordinary. So every cell in the body needs food, nutrients, oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide and other wastes. Blood performs this transport. Components of blood: plasma, RBCs. Plasma, fluid part of the blood. Transport food, carbon dioxide, salts, hormones and wastes. Through plasma, food is transported, carbon dioxide is transported, hormones is transported, wastes and salts are also transported. And RBC, red blood cells, contain hemoglobin. They transport oxygen from lungs to body tissues. So RBCs transport oxygen from lungs to body tissues. Our pump, the heart. The heart is a muscular pumping organ. Its main job is to pump oxygen rich blood to all parts of the body, send oxygen pump oxygen rich blood to all parts of the body, send oxygen or poor blood to the lungs for oxygenation. Oxygen poor blood, that means deoxygenated blood to the lungs for oxygenation. Why does the heart have four chambers? The heart has right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle, and a septum or dividing wall that separates the right and left sides. So this right and left side is divided by a septum, that is called dividing wall. This prevents mixing of oxygen rich blood and oxygen poor blood. This prevents the mixing of oxygen rich blood and oxygen poor blood, that means oxygen deoxygenated blood. So this prevents the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So the path of blood through the heart. Path of blood through the heart. First one is oxygenated blood from lungs. Oxygenated blood from lungs comes through pulmonary veins and enters left atrium. If you get the figure, okay. First, oxygenated blood from lungs comes through pulmonary veins. First, we can look the image of the lungs. Image of the heart. Here you can see aorta. Aorta. Then pulmonary arteries. Here is pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins. First is atrium, right atrium, left atrium. Here is ventricles, right ventricle, left ventricle. In the figure, we can see that it stands like V, right? This is V, this is V. So remember it as ventricles. And this is right, this is left. And here it is vena cava, upper body, and vena cava from lower body, and here septum. This is septum that dividing wall between the left atrium and left and right ventricles. Path of the blood flow through the heart. First, the oxygenated blood from lungs comes through the pulmonary veins and enters into the left atrium. Okay. Oxygenated blood. Left atrium contracts, blood moves into the left ventricle. Left ventricle contracts, blood is pumped through aorta. Reaches all body parts, deoxygenated blood returns. Compacts from the body through the vena cava. Enters the right atrium, blood moves into right ventricle. Right ventricle contracts, blood is pumped through the pulmonary arteries and reaches lungs. This cycle repeats. In the lungs, carbon dioxide is removed and oxygen is absorbed. Okay. First the oxygenated blood enters from here, from lungs. From lungs, the oxygenated blood first comes to here and sorry. First, from pulmonary veins, starting with the pulmonary veins, from lungs, from lungs, the blood comes to right atria. From lungs, the coming blood will be oxygenated blood. So here you will get oxygenated blood in the right atrium. Then from atrium it moves into ventricle. And what happens? The ventricle contracts. And as a shift, when we apply pressure or it contracts, what happens? The water or the blood present in moves upwards and it moves to this and moves to aorta, and through aorta it goes to all body parts and it gets to all body parts, and from there cellular respiration occurs and the deoxygenated blood comes back through vena cava from body parts. It comes to vena cava, through vena cava, and it reaches the right ventricle, and from right ventricle it reaches the first it reaches the right atrium, then it reaches the right ventricle, and right ventricle contracts, and as a result the blood flows through pulmonary arteries to the lungs for deoxygenation, for oxygenation, because it is deoxygenated blood that has to remove the carbon dioxide and get oxygen. That's why it will convert to oxygenated blood in the lungs. Okay. So here, if you are removing the entire figures, first the oxygenated blood will be represented as red. This oxygenated blood first comes from lungs. Lungs, there is oxygenated blood, and the oxygenated blood first reaches from lungs to pulmonary veins and it reaches left atrium, and from left atrium it moves to left ventricle, and as a result, due to pressure, left ventricle contracts, and as a result these two valves closes and blood cannot go back to the left atrium, and this blood goes to aorta, and through aorta it moves to body parts. And from different body parts, now we are going to trace the flow of deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood is represented by this violet color. From this body parts, deoxygenated blood will comes to vena cava, and through vena cava the deoxygenated blood comes to right atrium, and from right atrium to right ventricle, and as a result, due to pressure, right ventricle contracts, and as a result these two valves closes and blood cannot go back to the right atrium, and blood go to pulmonary arteries and reaches lungs, and there lungs deoxygenation occurs, that is removal of oxygen occurs, and blood again get oxygenated, and the cycle repeats. Why are ventricles thicker than atria? The atria only push blood into ventricles, less force needed. So ventricles are thicker. Also ventricle pump blood out of the heart, so more force is needed. So ventricles are thicker. The ventricular wall is more thicker than atrial wall because ventricle pumps the blood or blood out of the heart, so it requires more pressure or more force, so its walls are thicker. Also atria push blood into the ventricles, so less force is needed. Atria pushes blood into the heart itself, into the part of the heart itself, but ventricle, the blood is pumped out of the heart itself. So ventricles have thicker muscles wall. Which chamber has the thickest wall? Left ventricle, because it pumps blood to the entire body. And the left ventricle has more thickest wall, because here you can see the thickness in the figure. The thickness of this wall is very high, look, as compared to the thickness of the right ventricle, because here, from here the blood moves to all the body parts, means our entire body, from legs, our patella, or our thighs, our hands, our brain, etc. But from the right ventricle, blood moves only to the lungs, and from lungs the other cycle starts. So left ventricle is little more thicker. Function of valves. And while remembering the heart, always remember that you are seeing the figure as seeing or you just say you're one of your friend to stand before you, or if I stand here, you are seeing my heart in this figure. That's why its position is given as right, left, etc. In your perspective it will be wrong, but when you're looking to my heart it will be right. So you want to imagine a human body in this image having heart. One minute, one minute, one minute. I have a little confusion. The image that we can ask ChatGPT. Position of heart. That I have a doubt, I will refer and tell you tomorrow. the position of real heart. Okay. And while coming to the function of valves, valves ensure that blood flows in one direction only. What is the function of valves? Valves help in the flow, blood flow only in one direction. That is, it cannot flow back to us. It can only move in one direction. Pulmonary veins are the veins that connects lungs to left atrium, so that it is a vein. So backflow of blood is prevented to the lungs. Left atrium to left ventricle to aorta to body, body to vena cava to right atrium to right ventricle to pulmonary artery to lungs. The heart is a four-chambered muscular organ that pumps oxygenated blood to the body and deoxygenated blood to the lungs while preventing mixing of the two types of blood. That is, deoxygenated and oxygenated blood are prevented from mixing. So coming to this section, transportation. We have seen in previous sections that blood transport food, oxygen and waste materials in our bodies. Class 9 we learned about blood being fluid connective tissue. Blood consists of fluid medium called plasma, in which the cells are suspended. Plasma transport food, carbon dioxide and nitrogenous wastes in dissolved form. Oxygen is carried by RBC. Many other substances like salts are also transported by blood. We thus need a pumping organ to push blood around the body, a network of tubes to reach all the tissues, and a system in place to ensure that this network can be repaired if damaged. Our pump, the heart. The heart is a muscular organ which is as big as our fist. The heart is only this much. The power of heart. So small, but the power. Because both oxygen and carbon dioxide have to be transported by the blood, the heart has different chambers to prevent the oxygen rich blood from mixing with the blood containing carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide rich blood has to reach the lungs for the carbon dioxide to be removed, and the oxygenated blood from the lungs has to be brought back to the heart. This oxygen rich blood is then pumped into the rest of the body. We can follow this process step by step. Oxygen rich blood from the lungs comes to the thin walled upper chamber of the heart on the left atrium. The left atrium relaxes when it is collecting this blood. It then contracts while the next chamber, the left ventricle relaxes so that the blood is transferred to it. When the muscular left ventricle contracts in its turn, the blood is pumped out to the body. What? We can follow this process step by step. Oxygen rich blood from chamber of the heart on the left atrium. The oxygen rich blood from the lungs comes to the thin walled upper chamber of the heart on the left atrium. The left atrium relaxes when it is collecting this blood. It then contracts while the next chamber, the left ventricle, relaxes so that blood is transferred to it. Okay. When the blood comes to this right atrium, oxygen rich blood comes from lungs to this left atrium. First the left atrium contracts and left ventricle relaxes, and as a result, when we contract the blood flows to the left ventricle, and as a result the left atrium relaxes, and after that left ventricle contracts. That's the left atrium. First the lungs contains oxygenated air. That oxygenated blood is coming to left atrium through pulmonary veins. So in the left atrium, first the left atrium contracts and the left ventricle relaxes. Blood flow from left atrium to left ventricle, and after that left ventricle contracts, and as a result blood flow through body parts through aorta. The left atrium relaxes when it is collecting the blood. If it then contracts while the next chamber, the left ventricle relaxes so that the blood is transferred to it. When the muscular left ventricle contracts in its turn, the blood is pumped into the body. Deoxygenated blood comes from the body to the upper chamber to the right atrium as it relaxes. As the right atrium contracts, the corresponding lower chamber right ventricle dilates or relaxes. Dilates means relax. This transfers blood to the right ventricle, which in turn pumps it to the lungs for oxygenation. Since ventricles have to pump blood into various organs, they have thicker muscular walls than atria do. Valves ensure that blood does not flow backwards when the atria or ventricles contract, and valves prevents the backward flow of oxygenated or deoxygenated blood when the atria or ventricles contract. Human body is just a miracle, extraordinary miracle. Once more we can look here. Oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood. Lungs containing oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood from lungs comes to pulmonary veins and it reaches left atrium. It reaches left atrium only when the left atrium is relaxed. So in the relaxed condition of left atrium, the blood comes to left atrium and left atrium contracts and left ventricle relaxes, and as a result blood flow from left atrium to left ventricle. And after that left ventricle contracts, and as a result blood flow from left ventricle to different body parts through aorta. What happens in body parts? If it reaches in my fingers, there are cells, there are different cells are there, and in the cells the oxygenated blood, from the oxygenated blood cells takes the oxygen and produce energy, and the carbon dioxide from that cell is passed through the blood plasma or deoxygenated blood, and it comes to right atrium through different vena cava. From the upper body and from the lower body there are different vena cava. That vena cava releases blood to the left atrium. The left atrium receives blood only when the right atrium receives blood only when the right atrium is relaxed and the right ventricle is contracted stage. It always occurs simultaneously. That is, when the right atrium comes here, means relaxing and contraction happens together. Here there will be for example I am selling, here there will be 1 liter of blood, at the same time here will be 1 liter of blood. I'm saying for an example. So at the time here it relaxes, this contracts, and as a result the blood flow from right ventricle to pulmonary arteries to lungs for the purpose of deoxygenation or removing carbon dioxide from that blood and to make that blood oxygenated. And at the span of time when here will be empty or the contraction takes place, this will be relaxed, and at that time itself blood from other parts come to right atrium, and then right atrium contracts and right ventricle relaxes. Thus blood flow occurs from right atrium to right ventricle. And when right ventricle contracts, right atrium relaxes, and at that time blood flow comes back from different parts of the body to right atrium. And here we can see septum is a dividing wall between the right and left ventricle. Also the ventricular walls are very thick as compared to atria. Also the left ventricle has more thickness of the wall as compared to the right ventricle, because from left ventricle the oxygenated blood moves to different parts of the body, so it needs much bigger walls. Once more, coming to the full heart section. Why does the heart have 4 chambers? The heart has right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. A septum dividing wall separates the right and left sides. This prevents mixing of oxygen-rich blood and oxygen-poor blood. Path of blood through the heart. Oxygenated blood from lungs comes through pulmonary veins, enters the left atrium. Left atrium contracts, blood moves into right ventricle. Left ventricle contracts, blood is pumped through the aorta, reaches all body parts. Deoxygenated blood returns, comes back from the body through the vena cava, enters the right atrium. Right atrium contracts, blood moves into the right ventricle. Right ventricle contracts, blood is pumped through the pulmonary arteries, reaches the lungs. In the lungs, carbon dioxide is removed, oxygen is absorbed. The cycle repeats continuously. Why are ventricles thicker than the atria? Atria only push blood into the ventricles, less force needed. Ventricles pump blood out of the heart, more force is needed, and hence ventricles have thicker muscle walls. So today's session is completed. We will see the rest of the session tomorrow, and tomorrow morning there will be a revision of the topics that we have studied today. So we can see tomorrow. Till then, good nights, goodbye.